to share memories of Greg. I invite Kalyn Walutin, Judith Warren, Kathy Blanford, and Jim Parks to come up here.
I'm Kalyn Walutin. I'm Madeline's daughter and Greg's stepdaughter, and I'm speaking today on behalf of the Rufo Walutin clan. I lived in Spain for 7 years, where I married my husband Salvador, and where we had our daughter Claudia. To move to the United States, we needed a sponsor. Well, Salvador needed one, and I was not allowed, as I had lived so long outside of the U.S. Greg and my mother sponsored Salva so that he could get his first permanent residence card, his green card. While my mother was happy to help, she and I both approached the situation with the stoicism required upon entering a bureaucratic nightmare. Greg, on the other hand, was truly excited. Helping us immigrate to the United States reminded him of his parents' immigration experience from Sweden. Greg was thrilled to help us start a new life, just as others had helped his family and countless immigrants before and after them. When Salvador became a U.S. citizen in 2006, Greg made sure he could attend his citizenship ceremony outside of Detroit. It was an emotional event for him, as citizenship was his family's dream long before it was ours. Greg always dreamed of having more family. When our daughter Claudia was born in 1995, Greg became a grandpa. He traveled to Spain to see her when she was a month old, and of course, she greeted him wearing a Born to be Hugged t-shirt. She captured his heart then, and throughout her life, brought out parts of Greg that we had never seen. The usually strong-willed Greg melted in the Disney store one day as his 6-year-old granddaughter held up a glittery Tinkerbell dress and looked at him beseechingly. "Grandpa, do you want me to have this?" Claudia's influence continued over the years. When I think of Greg and music, I think James Taylor with the volume way down, so much so that if you were riding in the back seat of his car, you might not even hear the lyrics. The day Claudia graduated from high school, we all went to lunch at a Mexican restaurant. Afterwards, Claudia got to drive us home in a Cadillac on her special day. To celebrate, Claudia cranked up White Walls by hip-hop artist Macklemore, the song with the Cadillac hook. Off black Cadillac. Terrible. Choir, please forgive me, but that's the tag. Instead of asking her to turn it down or caustically commenting on her musical choices, Grandpa Greg started to jam in the front seat. It might have been the margarita he had at lunch, but at least some of his dance moves and relaxed attitude were due to the granddaughter effect. Greg was my stepfather, but I first knew him as the guy who helped my mother on her trips to Courtesy Hardware. I knew Greg as my mother's good friend, which he considered himself to be at that time. But the truth is, my mother fell in love with Greg the first time she heard him speak. She became friends with him and then waited patiently for 6 years for him to fall in love with her. My mom doesn't feel able to speak today, but she says she thinks of Greg as the gift that life gave her. He was the love of her life, her good, beautiful man, and she will always be grateful for all the love and laughter that they shared. The biggest thing Greg and I had in common, besides my mother and Claudia, was teaching. As a young man, Greg taught at a middle school that served the Robert Taylor housing projects. For 9 years, I taught in bilingual programs in the Chicago area, and I currently teach English as a second language in the Detroit area. When I first started teaching in the mid-90s, Greg received the kind of letter from a formal pupil that teachers only dream about. Brian was his name. Upon winning an award for his military service, Brian was asked to discuss the most influential people in his life. And he told the story of Greg, who was, as he put it, a close second to my parents. But he didn't stop there. Brian tracked Greg down and wrote a letter to Greg describing how Greg had helped shape his life. In Brian's own words, "It all started because a wonderful teacher had a wacky idea to bring newspapers to class to help students with their reading." Reading the newspaper transformed how Brian viewed the world. "I always felt that there was more than the few square miles that engulfed the lives of my friends and family. But I only came to realize how much more there really was as I sat and read the Friday edition of the Chicago Sun-Times every week, thanks to you." Brian went on to join the Air Force and saw the people and places that Greg's newspaper activity had allowed him to dream of. And his career in educational pursuits led him all over the United States and the world, from San Antonio to California, from Japan to the Philippines, to name only of the few places that he traveled to and lived. What I didn't know before was that Brian wrote Greg again several years later. Brian ends that letter by writing, "In the card you sent in 1997, you mentioned that you had shared our story with your stepdaughter, who is a teacher also. I only hope you encouraged her to try your bring newspapers to class technique, because I'm sure within her class is a dreamer waiting to read about all the things he can turn into dreams. I salute you, Greg, and all the dreamers, young and old."
I was Greg's daughter-in-law. I'm married to David Walutin, Madeline's son. It was March 1998. I had just walked into 3-year-old Claudia's birthday party, surrounded by strangers, lovely strangers that were to become my in-laws, but strangers. And I had no idea who this man was. He walked up to me and started peppering me with questions. You don't know Greg doing that, do you? "So how's it going so far?" I told him I was a little out of sorts. He then asked me what I thought was a very odd question. "How many hugs have you had today?" I had no idea. I wasn't in the practice of counting my hugs. So I said, 2 maybe? "Well," he said, "you need 10 more. And he proceeded to give me my 3rd hug of the day. Then he said, "Have you seen my buddy over there?" And he introduced me to my wonderful mother-in-law and my 4th hug of the day. Now here I have to apologize to Claudia because she was the slowest one at the party, being 3. I'm sorry I made you cry getting the rest of my hugs. That was the first time I met Greg. Greg was a complex person, responsible, moral, compassionate, a little moody when the world didn't make sense. But what I will always remember about Greg and hold in my heart is his awesome, childlike sense of wonder and play. Have you ever played teddy bear roulette? No, it's great. You take a child's teddy bear, maybe Claudia's, maybe Tony's up there, and you put it on a ceiling fan, and guess which way it will fall. And you do this again and again and again until the child's mother confiscates the bear. Greg introduced me to this wonderful game one Thanksgiving, and I have introduced it to other children. Have you ever gazed at a Christmas tree and looked at the lights? Now, think about putting the most awesome 3D glasses on and looking at those lights with beautiful shapes, angels, stars, anything you can think of. Greg introduced me to that last Christmas. Have you sat down to a scrumptious snack of freeze-dried food, giggling as you realize you're eating the same thing as the astronauts? Yep, Greg. Greg embraced technology, and as such, he had a Facebook page. And his very last post, so the last words I know from Greg, were a quote by Gandhi: "In a gentle way, you can change the world." Greg, my father-in-law, my friend, you have done that by showing so many people that goodness, humor, and fun can make a difference in one's health, community, and life. I miss you, Greg. Thank you for hugging me that very first day.